Several years after the 21st century, we are presented with the planet Earth where every part of it has been developed. Machines and spacecrafts were made with ease due to the advancement of technology. But even with this kind of innovation, mankind would still find a way to start a war. That's why a different type of weapon is introduced that changed the method of warfare: the object. A new large-scale superweapon that has been produced by a small country and is capable of fending off a combined attack by several countries. With its stacked layer of armor and a very efficient damage control system merged between the plates of armor, on top of its core providing enough energy to power its weapons, the object faced the most well-known super weapon of humanity, a nuclear warhead. Half of its armor melted. But it survived nonetheless, using its remaining functional armaments, wiped out all of its adversaries, and because of its performance, the object became the only tool for war. Several countries collapsed, even the ones that are considered superpower, which ultimately divided the planet into 4 coalitions, but the divisions of land are blurry due to the sharing of borders between powers, causing multiple small-scale wars, and because we humans are bound to fight ourselves. The object became a necessity. We switch to a scene where 2 radar operators are seen clearing snow. Here we have Quentin Barbadage, a trainee and a mechanic in their battalion, and his best friend Havia Winchell, a person born of nobility, and an heir to their family. After eating their rations and doing their work, Quentin suggested they hunt animals in the mountains because the rations were unpalatable. While climbing the mountain, Havia was tasked to find a deer while Quentin saw a lake and decided to go fishing instead. Suddenly a girl appears behind Quentin. Here we see the appearance of the princess known as Melinda Brantini, the operator of the object named Baby Magnum. They asked each other the reason why they chose this battalion. Quentin said he wants to study the most basic object, the standard model stationed in the base, while Melinda has no choice for herself. They all head back to base where Havia and Quentin are summoned by their superior, Miss Felicia Capistrano, the commander of the 37th Mobile Maintenance Battalion, gave the 2 a lecture while she was commanding an operation on her tablet, adding more work to her table. She asked about the wild animals that they hunted for today since she doesn't like the rations either. A wild deer was successfully hunted, which resulted in lighter penalty. Therefore Havia's punishment were clearing the runway before the sun sets, while Quentin's punishment will be given by his instructor since he skipped their lessons. Quentin arrived at what seemed to be a depot for the object where his instructor, Ayami Cherry Blossom, an old maintenance lady, yelled at Quentin to hurry up. His punishment is to repair the evac equipment of the pilot, which is regarded as a bad omen among the maintainers. Quentin asked about the superstitions about the object, such as the hanging rapier and its paint. The instructor said the white paint is the cheapest color, but the rapier is for good luck. After making a scene in the hangar, they barbecued the deer they hunted earlier with Miss Felicia, where they reviewed what happened today. Quentin contemplates what will happen to the beaten object and its military base. Felicia's response is simple: if they lose, they surrender the territory so that they won't get hurt, making the object a clean way to wage wars. But now he does not have to wonder because their object, Baby Magnum, got defeated by another object that specializes in snow combat. In the devastating snowy storm winds, an object was traversing through the cold peaks. The captain of another object detected them and issued their next move to prepare for combat. Back at the hangar, the old lady was operating the object. The little girl boots it up to its maximum output. The object, Baby Magnum, along with its pilot, Melinda Brantini, is now taking off. As Quentin watches them depart, he tells them that an object was given to them by the world power called the Faith Organization. Based on its appearance, they named it the Water Strider. Back at the battlefield, Melinda initiated an attack towards the enemy, which unfortunately she missed. She aims at it and fires again. The enemy object was pushed back and slides across the field. It then proceeds to fire back at them. As the 2 exchanged shots over and over, both sides knew that their thick armor would only prolong this fight to such an extent. The situation got more complicated as their fight determined the victor depending on who has the most position advantage. Melinda was given an instruction not to let the enemy get behind her. The captain stated that both their speeds are equally matched, so she hoped that the princess could outwit the enemy. But to do that, she needs to exhibit the skills of a first-generation class. As the enemy object closes in on them from the side, it fires a ton of shots at Baby Magnum, causing it to reduce its speed. For the second wave of attack, they took a hit from a large beam that went through the object, which also caused a lot of damage around the area. Quenther was on the ground and overlooks the battlefield. As he turns around, the Water Strider fires another laser beam and completely destroys baby Magnum. Luckily, the pilot was able to survive, and from that moment on, it marked the start of a real nightmare. After the fight, Havia runs towards Quenther and asks why the enemy was aiming at them. He adds that if an object loses, they raise the flag to finish it off. Quenther checks his signal, but he can't contact them. Havia looks hopeless as the enemy charges its weapon at them. They tried running, but the enemy took its shot and hit the camp near them. The survivors in the camp were forced to evacuate and run away. The enemy object moved closer to them and launched another attack. Quenther later found out that it was targeting their facilities. They quickly ran through the chaos as the enemy kept on rampaging. They stopped running as the enemy blocked their path, but it unexpectedly turned around and slid off. Havia told him that they should use this chance to run away. They picked up a device which is a signal that indicates where Melinda is. The captain arrives at the scene and tells the two of them to escape over the other side of the mountain. Quenther can't help but think about the princess, but she insists that the signal was for them to use the time to run from the enemy. He couldn't believe the situation, but Havia thought that there was no choice but to abandon her. Quenther adds that if they were given enough time, he couldn't resist helping her. After the argument, the rest of the soldiers drove off. Quenther asked for Havia's gun and went over to help the princess through the snowy storm. Quenther kept walking until she found Melinda, and over the cliff, he sees that she's been surrounded by a few units. He sits down for a moment and gathers himself as he's about to eliminate the target. As he aims at them, he hears what the guards were plotting and plans to torture her. Quenther takes his shot and gets 3 kills straight. The one left was about to shoot him but was quickly dispatched by the princess. The man down got a quick shot at him, but was immediately pushed away by Havia. He fell to the bottom, which knocked Quenther out cold. He was later woken up by Havia. Quenther was thankful of him and asked where the princess was. The princess asked why he would save her despite being only a commoner. He replied saying it doesn't matter to him since they're all willing to help one another. Havia added that she wasn't good enough on her own, so Quenther didn't have much choice but to save her. After their conversation, the enemy object caught onto them and was headed their way. They made a run for it and hid in a cave Havia had found earlier. As they kept on running, the enemy closed in on them and pointed the weapon towards them. They got behind the rock and pulled out the explosives. Havia threw it to the cave entrance and ran towards it. After humping in, they ran further back into the cave. They stopped for a moment as Havia detonated the bomb. The snow cloud covered their escape, causing the enemy object to turn around. At the other end of the cave, they took a rest. Quenther knew that even if they'd escaped, their comrades would still be in danger. The princess wonders if they'll survive if they keep playing decoy. Havia says that they'd be dead for sure and have to hold their own against the objects. Havia then asks where they should run to next. Quenther then questions him and says that he'll be a disgrace if he just keeps running. He then asks what they should do. Quenther says that they're in a do-or-die situation and that they'll have to assess the situation themselves. After their chatting, Quenther was left with no choice but to exploit the enemy object with only their wits. After hiding in the forest from the enemy object and coming up with a plan, Quenther looks up from a cliff and spots that the big black object named Water Strider is still looking for them. The three of them now start to plan how to defeat it by analyzing its main functions and weak points. While walking through the forest, they manage to find an abandoned lookout post. They camp inside to observe and gather intel. After looking around certain areas while avoiding the enemies, Melinda encourages them since she will stay behind in case anything goes wrong. Quenther and Havia find a suspicious place with an unlocked door. Both of them find turbines that are used to power up the Water Strider. While Melinda was standing guard for them, she noticed the enemy object outside steadily going in their direction. Havia notices that the enemy is approaching right near them. Quenther calms down and reviews the Water Strider's maintenance manual, in which he sees the answer on how to defeat it. He tries to look for a certain gadget with Havia guarding the door. They get outside and plan their next move. Both of them agree to the idea of using a sticky bomb as a diversion tactic. After running away, they spot Melinda captured by the enemy soldiers. Quenther and Havia argue if they're going to save her. After convincing Havia to get in on the plan, he gets access to their base's radio channel. Quenther explains the situation that they're in and then asks for any reinforcement to help them. After the radio comms, Quenther and Havia were suddenly surrounded by enemy soldiers. The three of them were captured by the enemies. While stalling for time, the enemy's object named Prometheus had its maintenance completed. While the enemy looked at it in awe, Quenther tackles the enemy commander and fails purposefully in order to take the intercom from him. He presses the button and the object's leg explodes but does not deal any damage in the process. The enemy commander laughs at him, saying it's pointless. Quenther then proceeds to explain that there is a self-destruct system inside an object if the sensor gets destroyed. He shows the sensor of the enemy object he's been holding, implying it was removed. The system inside the object starts to go crazy and will initiate a self-destruct system. The object named Prometheus explodes itself, causing widespread damage to everything around the vicinity. After the explosion, everything was in ruins. Then suddenly hidden soldiers started shooting at Quenther. He then used the sticky bombs that he and Havia planted as a way to fight them back. They successfully defeated the enemy but were confronted by the commander pointing a gun at him. Just when he was about to shoot, the reinforcements came to help them. It was Miss Frolacia who led the reinforcements to their location. After the war, the whole base celebrated their achievements in winning the war. Here we see everyone dressed up nicely for the occasion. They will then be rewarded to take a vacation from the war to enjoy their lives. But spoiler alert, they were sent to another post on a battlefield to join Melinda for another battle.
Thanks for staying in tune with our manga recap. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for more updates from our content.